All right, thank you. Welcome on behalf of Cinema Learning Challenge to our virtual event. I want to thank you all for joining us. Donors, thank you. And I want to let you know that I will be hosting this on behalf of Cinema Learning Challenge and Big and Digital. My name is Sensore, and I'm so glad that all of you could join us. Big and Digital has been distributing this movie since 2012, and so we are so excited that we are able to now take this onto a virtual platform and share that, as well as all of these amazing people who helped to make this all happen. I want to, in honor of the team of filmmakers, thank each and every one of you for all of your work and for being here and for sharing all of your knowledge with everybody. And I just wanted to turn it over now and thank Stephen and turn over the reins to him.
Okay, thank you so much, Sincere. I want to give a big thanks to Big and Digital. And just for those of you who don't, again, know exactly who I am, I'm Stephen Van Vuuren, and I'm the filmmaker here in Greensboro, North Carolina. And often the film is associated with me, but I'm very excited that we have this great panel of people here because there were over 100 volunteers who made this film and over 1,600 donors. So we're really excited to have you guys joining us today. And it's a real honor for us to share the film with you. This is our second round with the streaming and live and interactive, and hopefully it'll be a little smoother. But if not, be sure to look for the chat window, or if you can't get anything working right, you can go to the In Saturn's Rings website, go to news. There's streaming instructions with a phone number that you can text or call if you're having trouble getting everything working. And if it doesn't work, we will send you a follow-up stream. You'll be able to rewatch this stream, and a little announcement. We're going to make both of these live stream Q&As available separately as video for people to watch later. So if for some reason you don't get everything working right, don't worry, we'll get it all to you. The first thing I want to say is this film is something that was originally intended to be watched on an 8-story high IMAX screen or a giant, 20, 30 meter wide full dome. So it's a very different experience watching it as we're all watching it on smaller screens right now. But so think of it more as an appetizer to the main event. And we still hope, in fact, we have confirmed that one theater, a full dome theater in Louisiana, is going to reopen the film at the end of September. So hopefully, as the world gradually returns to normal, we'll get the film back out in theatrical, and we'll all have opportunities to do this again in person. But what really makes this event special is these panelists that we have here. It probably would be completely impossible to get all of these people in the same room. And this, again, is just a small sampling of the many image processors who worked on the film. And we're missing, due to illness, Ian Reagan, who was in the Tuesday stream. So when we make that video available, you'll be able to hear him talk a lot more about Titan and what he did on the work in Titan. But anyway, this great group of panelists are here for you to ask questions and hear their contribution and how important they were to the making of the film. So they're going to quickly introduce themselves and let you know who they are, where they are, and what they did on the film. So we're going to start with Mike.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Malaska. I first met Stephen V2 when he was posting some of his images on unmannedspaceflight.com, looking for assistants and volunteers. I became absolutely enamored with the whole film project idea and basically started helping him out fairly early on. I'm helping getting some financial backing and also doing some image processing work for him. And as the film has begun to expand and get into much larger number of super talented volunteers, it's been just amazing to be a part of it. Since I started working on the film, I actually kind of ended up going into planetary science as a professional, and you actually can see some of the work from the Cassini radar team that I was actually a part of in the film. So I hope you all enjoy the film, and I'll pass it on to the next film helper.
Hi everyone, my name is Bill Eberly. I'm a software developer who joined about 6 years ago on this project. I'm primarily responsible for the universe fly-through section of the film, where we're going to be flying through 5 million real galaxies.
Hi guys, I'm Jason Harwell. I'm one of the co-producers, and I mainly worked on the galaxy fly-through sequence as well, especially the up-close images. And joined the project in about 2012 and quarterbacked the image production team on getting them ready for animation plates. And it's been a great honor to be part of this. So thanks very much for joining.
I'm next. I'm Judy Schmidt. I worked with Jason on those galaxy images, mainly Andromeda and Roofuki. Is that how you say that? Anyway, I did some image cleaning and I picked stars up off the pictures so that they could be given that parallax.
I'm next. I'm Steve Danford. I'm an observational astronomer located in Greensboro, North Carolina. I got started in 2014 when we got into the business of calculating some of the things necessary to show fly-throughs as you fly into or toward one of the galaxies. What does it take to astronomically accurately depict that?
Okay, my name is Tim Martin. I'm an educator based out of Greensboro, North Carolina area. I've had over 20 years in education and currently teaching astronomy at Elon University. One of my big contributions to the film was to be an editor as well as author and consultant for the Educator's Guide. So if there are any teachers out there, I do want to encourage you to go onto the In Saturn's Rings website and take a look for the download of the Educator's Guide so you can do interactive lessons with your students about many of the topics you'll be seeing here in the next few minutes. Back to Stephen.
Thanks, everyone. And I can't overstate what the contributions of everybody was to this film on this panel, but I have to give a special shout out to Jason and Bill and Ian, who's not with us, who put in many years and enormous faith in the project. We had so many incredible technical difficulties that were seemed insurmountable at times, and they really just always kept the faith. And finally, a big thank you to Mike for those of you who don't know, he basically kind of kept the film alive in the early days before we had the privilege of going viral. He instantly got it. I never had to explain why I was doing it or why it was important. He just knew that. So that was his tremendous faith. And of course, we had some early donors who felt the same way. So a big thank you to them. So before we roll the film, I wanted to share a couple of things that to give you a little sense of context. And those of you who followed the film know that the original tagline of the movie when it was called Outside In was called "Context is Everything." And the big deal about, if I can talk and try to screen share at the same time, is this film is a multiplane animation film. And what is multiplane photo animation? This was actually not a new invention. Multiplane animation is from Walt Disney, and he originally refined the development of something called the multiplane camera, which was a vertical camera shooting down different animation plates. There's a great YouTube video. If you search in YouTube for the multiplane camera, you will find Walt Disney in Walt Disney style explaining how he broke things into a background. And in this image, that would be these distant galaxies, and then a midground, which would be these galaxies that are in parallax floating around, and a foreground, which is this main ARP 273 that Jason and Judy and his team worked on. And by moving these planes in multiple layers, that's how the entire film has been created. Now, we had some shots that were more like Walt Disney, where we had 10 or 11 planes of animation. This particular 5 million galaxy shot is notable that we have over 1 million individual planes in this shot, which is by far the most complicated multiplane ever invented. And it was just necessity. And we'll talk a lot more about this when we do the Q&A after, but I just wanted you to know that when you're looking at this, every single speck that you see in this is an individual photograph of the galaxy that we processed and placed as accurately as possible. The next thing I'm going to want you to look out for something on a very different aspect of this. This is an image that we get asked a lot of questions about at times, because, and the question is, how is the sun visible in this shot of the galaxy? And this is time lapse done by another person who was not here, Colin Legg. And he was a fantastic volunteer that spent a lot of money and about a year building a 5-camera time lapse rig so that we could capture time lapse at the highest resolution that it would still work on the giant screen, because a single camera even today still won't quite do it. So these 5 cameras, he went out to find the darkest sky in the southern hemisphere where you can see the Milky Way better. And that is the full moon that you're seeing there. That is not the sun. Even the ground looks like it's day, but that's how dark that sky was. And again, just an incredible resolution, this image. So those are 2 things to look for. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to turn it back over to Sincere. We're going to roll the film, and for the panelists, make sure you mute your audio, and Sincere will walk us through the countdown, and then we will come back and give everybody a few minutes. So if you have any trouble watching the film, again, contact that telephone number, and we'll see you in just a bit.
All right, everybody. Thanks, Stephen. So I actually just put the link into the chat on both the panel side and for everybody else. And so if you go ahead and click on that, that's going to take you directly to the movie. What I'm going to ask you, though, is do not close this window. Just keep it up in your background. And we will go ahead and mute our side so that way we are not interrupting you at all. Sorry, it looks like. So we will go ahead and start the countdown. Once you are done with the movie, you can go ahead and close that window down and then rejoin us in chat. Just go ahead and put a quick note in there so that way we know how many people we have back. And let's go ahead and do the countdown. And in true space style, we're gonna do it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and click, please. I also am going to go ahead and click on my TV so that way I can watch along with you. And we will see you soon for the movie, after the movie. Thank you.
And I think people are finishing up watching the movie. I appreciate all the kind words and hope people didn't have too much technical difficulty watching it. If you do, just send us a message. We'll get you straightened out and make sure you get to watch it one way or the other. And I do want to, while we're waiting for everybody else to come back before we get into the formal part of the panel, Gary Lazich mentioned a quote from Carl Sagan about the shores of the cosmic ocean. And actually, that's how this all got started. Is I read Cosmos as a book before I ever saw it as a TV show when I was a kid. And that's where I read about Titan, and became such a huge Carl Sagan fan. And he was a major inspiration to the film. And that's, of course, that's why there's a quote, and we got permission from Andre and his widow to use that quote in the film. And certainly the ending was kind of our homage to Carl Sagan. And we also got permission to use the phrase pale blue dot in the dialogue as well, because we like to give credit where credit is due. And if you do get a chance to rewatch the film, you have, isn't it 24 hours, Sincere, to rewatch it?
Correct.
Be sure to pause on the image sources credits. There's a lot of amazing image processors, and hopefully one of them who does not appear out in the world, but Gordon Ugarovic, who in some ways the film would have not got that far, because when I suddenly realized what was going to happen with how many photographs I was actually going to need, it's like, there's no way I can process all these images. He at the time was the image processor I was most familiar with. And so I just sent him a message on unmanned spaceflight and said, you know, here's some images I would like to use. And he basically said, he's here. I see him down in chat. But basically Gordon said, use whatever you want. And so of there's so many of his images in this film buried here and there, and it's wonderful to have him on here watching the film, because there are so many people like that that contributed. Sincere, do we think we've got everybody back on? Or
I think we do. I think we're up to like 43 people in the chat now, and I think we've got everybody back. And if not, we'll have a couple people trickle, but I think we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. So what we're going to do now is we're going to hear a little more in depth from our panelists about some aspects of the film that they worked on. And you know, if you have questions about any of the content or how things were done or what things were, go ahead and put those in the chat, and we'll start compiling those and get into the Q&A after we have these very, very short little presentations. So we're going to start with Mike.
I'm going to try to share a screen. Can you all hear me?
You're good.
Okay. Whew. All right. Right. So I'm going to share a screen, and it's going to be sort of a bigger picture. So we just saw a really huge movie that spanned, you know, the age of the universe, that went through most of the universe, went across our solar system. So we saw really big stuff. And one of the things that this movie provides is an idea of, you know, these really big things that are out there. And one of the things that, you know, is part of the movie and is one of the messages is the list. They mentioned Titan. One of the questions that we're trying to answer is, you know, is there life in other worlds? We talked a lot about Titan in the movie, and that's one of the things that I'm working on, is trying to figure out how life could exist deep in the subsurface of Titan, and then what sort of technologies and missions could we plan to be able to go and try to find and answer some of those really big questions. And what's kind of cool is that maybe some of the people who are watching this movie and thinking about it and getting inspired might be some of the people who might grow up or be involved with missions, or even just hang out and watch as this mission unfolds and we discover life in other places in the solar system. And with that, I'm going to try to eventually share this slide with Stephen V2 for any later questions or comments, but I'll then go ahead and pass it over to the next speaker. And I want to thank Stephen and everybody else for all their hard work putting the movie together. And I hope you all enjoyed the movie. Thank you very much.
All right. Let me also try and share the screen. For those of you who did not get a chance to hear the introductions at the beginning, my name is Tim Martin. I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm an educator, have been an educator for over 20 years, including now teaching astronomy at Elon University. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen, because one of the things I'd like to share with you is an understanding a bit about how the film was put together in terms of understanding. Let's see, that's not what I wanted to share. Let me end that sharing. Stop share. It looks like we're several of us are having some screen share issues. Let me give this one more shot and come back, share screen.
It looks like the audience may be able to see us, even see the screen shares even when we can't, guys. Let's test it.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share the screen, and hopefully right now you are seeing a grid of numbers. Can anyone confirm that? Okay, great.
Yes.
So one of the things that is important to understand is that when we're talking about digital photography and the science instruments that were on board Cassini spacecraft is really a light sensor. If we take apart the word photograph, we understand that a photograph really is a graph of light. And what I'm going to share with you is just a couple snippets from one of the lessons that we have in the In Saturn's Rings Educator Guide. And here's a simple Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of numeric data on it. If you do the counting, we have just slightly over 1,000 cells here that have numeric data in it. One thing we can do, either by coloring by hand or assigning colors with the computer, we can assign values to these numbers. And when we assign values, the 0 obviously would be black and the higher numbers a lighter color. And taking a grid or an array of numbers like this, we can turn this into something like an image. Now, this is actually data simulated from one of a Saturn image, but it is incredibly low resolution. And when I say low resolution, we're talking about 1,000 pixels. So I have 1,000 picture elements or 1,000 numeric points here to give us some sense of an image of Saturn. This is something that could be, colorized by students by hand or manipulated in Excel when you're conditional formatting numeric data. But then we can kind of upscale this a little bit and see something like this. This is actually now some of the Cassini real data where we have over a megapixel. So we go from 1,000 pixels or a kilopixel image to a megapixel image, over 1 million pictures, 1 million picture elements, or 1 million spots where we see light and dark and various midtones and so on to get an idea of where Saturn is. Again, for educators out there, I'd really like to kind of highlight the Educator Guide, because this is one of many lessons. We have a lesson on cratering, we have a lesson on the night sky and dark sky, as well as a number of other things that you may be able to use with your students. Those of you who are a little bit more interested in image processing, though, in the Educator Guide, there are links to some directions to go more in depth in image processing. This is an example of some images of Jupiter. Here, the image on the left is taken in a red channel, the image in the center in green, and the image on the right in blue. And what we understand is that Cassini never had a color camera, never something like what I have with my phone. It has one very high sensitive camera that could take colored images by taking a picture through colored filters. And when we take the individual colored filters, the red, the green, and blue, we can assemble them and bring them together into a color image. Now, since these are still images, we may see some registration issues. If you notice this one moon of Jupiter, you can see it looks more red on one side and more green to blue on the other. That's because the moon actually changed position between the times when these images were made. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and again, encourage you to check out the Educator Guide. It's available for a free download on the In Saturn's Ring website. Although many of the lessons are geared towards middle school age, we do have some lessons that are appropriate for later elementary school students. Certainly many of the lessons would also be appropriate for high school students as well. And so I'd encourage you to take a look at the Educator Guide. And for those of you who are interested in this, all the lessons are keyed according to the next generation science standards. So they do meet national science standards if that is something that is important for your school system. And reach out and contact us if you have questions, because we'd love to see some of this getting out into the hands of young folks and inspiring the next generation of scientists. I'll pass it off to the next person now.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. I'm Steve Danford. I'm an astronomer, and I worked on the portion of this project that involved the fly-through images. And I want to take one of the images and talk a little bit about that, because what we were involved in doing, if you want to depict a fly-through in one of these and you want to do it accurately with real images, you've got to have accurate distances for the objects in your image. If you don't have that, might as well be an animation. So this is an image of a nearby galaxy, NGC 5128, and all of the points of light on the edge of it are surrounding this image. All of these points, it's about 1,000 different stars. They're all stars in our own Milky Way galaxy. We see the stars in this galaxy simply as a haze that's shown in here. So if we're going to fly into the galaxy or depict that, you've got to be able to fly first through the nearby stars, then through the stars that are a little further away, and then finally you're going to get to the galaxy, and then to the galaxies that are way beyond this particular galaxy. So we have to know the distances, and the way that we're going to know the distances is using something called stellar parallax. Astronomers have many, many different ways to find the distances to objects, but this is the kind of the basic method and the one that we use. And it's based on the idea, if you want to know the distance to this star that I'm pointing at, S, you can look at it from two different places in the Earth's orbit. So if you look at it from position E, and then you let the Earth travel 6 months and get over to E prime, you'll see the star against a very different background. So the background positions are shown by V and V prime right here. The closer the star is to us, the larger will be this little ellipse or the circle or a line, whatever it is that the star appears to travel. Star's not actually physically moving. It's us that's moving and seeing it from a different vantage point. Here's another way to look at it with a better picture of what the changing position is. Here's V prime and here's V. So the star appears in 6 months to travel from here to here. All we simply did was find out in catalogs what that distance appeared to be. And we can then use that to calculate how far away the star S was from the Earth. Now, for most of my career in astronomy, for most of the past, in fact, not more than my career is 200 years or so, we've had a few thousand stars for which we could measure this. But beginning in 1989, space observations from satellites, particularly from the Hipparcos satellite, gave us about 100,000 different stars for which we could measure this, and a greatly increased accuracy. So we began to use the Hipparcos catalog, and that's what we did. And this is one of the images that was used for the movie, NGC 5128, and all of the dots, again, there are about 1,000 of them in here, are all nearby stars. The two closest that we were able to find are S1 and S1 that is shown right there. Those two were stars. This one is about 1,500 light years from us. This one is about 2,000 light years from us. The galaxy itself is around 12 million light years from us. And then all of the other little ones here, for example, G1 right there, G2, that little bitty one right there, those are all background galaxies. So the image folks working with these could fly us through the nearby stars, through the galaxy at 12 million light years, and then on past the distant galaxies that are behind us. Okay, and I'm going to pass this on. Jason, you're up next.
Okay. So let me go ahead and share my screen here too. And hopefully you guys will be able to see that. Let's do this. Share it. And so this is one of the images that we get from Dr. Danford. And as you saw, S1 and G1, S stands for star, and 1 stands for the layer on which the star will appear in the stack of plates. And what we do is we get an image like this from Dr. Danford. This is the Andromeda Galaxy. And this is the photo negative. All of these are labeled according to their increasing distance. And then we go into Photoshop to separate those out into a stack of plates for animation that looks something like this. This is the camera plane. And then these would be the nearest stars, the next furthest stars, and so on all the way until we get to the galaxy, which is usually the furthest away. Although oftentimes you also do get many small dots that are farther background galaxies as well. And so the way we do that is we go into Photoshop, and let me get to my right image here. And this would be what Tim was referring to by the pixels. We're zoomed really in to the individual pixels, so you can see what an image looks like close up. And as we start backing out, we see the image begin to take shape. And that's the whole image right there. This image is 2030 by 1378. So this is a reduced size. We normally get many more pixels than this in our images, but for purposes of example here, I'll use this lower resolution one. And we would separate these stars out onto their own planes by selecting them and then painting them out. And you can move them when you're able to get them onto their own layer. And so we can move them from left to right, and when they're in the camera plane, you can move forward and backwards. So this is the original image that we would get. And then once they're separated onto their own layers, you can see each individual star distance element isolated. Those are all the background stars. And the galaxy itself can also then be moved with a bit of parallax. And that's what gives us our sense of depth. And so the final result is a painted stack of images that, when it's all said and done, looks almost indistinguishable from the source image itself. And to get into some of the more nitty-gritty details of some of the real masterful image editing that folks did, Judy's going to take that from here, and she'll tell you about some of the really more advanced image processing that she used to get to a level like this. Thanks, guys.
Yes, thanks, Jason. I really honestly don't have much more to add. It's kind of hard to show what actually goes on. I could show you, I mean, when he says painting, it kind of is like, take a tablet and pressure sensitive pen and just go to town on it. It takes a long time to separate those stars, and like take Steve's annotations and pick each little star off the canvas. Let me share my screen for a moment. This is another image that we worked on. This is Ophiuchus. It's one of the hardest names to say in astronomy. Some people say it Ophiuchus or whatever. Anyway, yeah. As you can see, like, it looks really cool too when you finally get it done, to take all of those background stars off and see nothing but the nebulosity. I could just like flip back and forth forever. But yeah, and some of it's also just like dirty work, cleaning up things like this. I don't know how well you can see this thing. It's called a filter ghost. Oh, everyone's frozen. Can you still hear me? Oh no, okay, you're
Yes.
just quiet. You're just very quiet. Yeah. So I turn this on and turn it off. You can see how it's been carefully removed from the image so that it doesn't, confuse people when they view it in the film. Maybe they wouldn't even see it, but I mean, some people are very perceptive, and I'm always surprised, in Hubble images, people will ask, like, what are these little donuts? And that's just the shape. It's like a reflection of the telescope itself, the filter, and like the struts that hold the telescope itself up. Yeah, that's one thing I can show you anyway. And then you can see the actual painting that I've done to try to get rid of that thing. Like in each individual red, blue, and green channel, it has to be done because it's a little bit different in each channel. So yeah. So I'll get rid of that. Make things pretty. Do the mainly just like grunt work, trying to separate the stars out because it's just too much work for one person to handle or two people. So yeah, Stephen and Jason were really trying to find any extra hands they could. And that's what I did. Worked a lot on that Andromeda picture that Jason was showing as well. And I will pass it on to Bill, I believe. Bill.
Well, thanks, Judy. My name is Bill Eberly. I'm a software engineer by day, and I came on the film, and I've never worked in image processing before. I've never worked in filmmaking before, so this was all an extremely new process for me. And what I ended up working on was that a fly through of those 5 million galaxies. So we just saw all the amazing work that Judy and Jason did, and the work from Dr. Danford to get us the science information to build those galaxies that we could fly through. And so my goal here was to get us some context for where those things exist in the bigger universe. So I'll share here. Here we are. So to do that, we took data from the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, which is a telescope that has images of most of the northern hemisphere sky. Those images look something like this. There's nearly 400,000 of these. So obviously we get to that many images. We're way past the scale where we can go in here and cut these out by hand. We've got to write some software to do it. So you can see in this image, we've got galaxies, and then we've also got, our local Milky Way stars. The problem with that is that we want the galaxies, because we're going to be out in the bigger universe, we don't want what's inside of the Milky Way. So we want to find all these galaxies and throw the rest of the stars away, and then take the galaxies and put them in 3D space so we can do that big fly through. So me and my team, we wrote some software that would analyze these photos, and try to find objects in them, and cross-reference it with data files that Sloan provides that have analyzed, where are there galaxies in these images, where are there stars. So we'd try to find things that looked like circles or blobs, and cross-reference that with where there were known galaxies. We'd take those, we'd kind of select them, and we'd cut them out and save them as their own files. So as you probably heard in the narration, we ended up with 5 million of these galaxies. They're actually way more than 5 million in that data set, but it's probably a good thing we only had 5 million because we had enough trouble trying to cram these all into the film. So this is just a very, very, very small subset of that 5 million here. These are some of the bigger ones. You can see there's spiral galaxies near the bottom. Looks like there's 2 galaxies colliding. We've got galaxies head on, and all sorts of amazing pictures here. Here's some more, and down to some of the much smaller ones. Like I said, we have 5 million individual images of galaxies here. So after we have all these images, the next part is actually getting them into the film. And when you've got, like we saw with the bigger galaxy images that we're flying through, if you've got 5 or 10 layers of different plates, that's easy to do by hand. Again, we've got 5 million of something. We're at the scale where we've got to use some computer programming here to deal with all this. We broke these up into 2 sections. We had the galaxies that were so far away that were behind the object we're going to get to. We're never going to actually go through them. So we broke those into these big background plates. This is one example of one of those background plates. And this is a small section of one of them. These plates ended up being 10,000 by 10,000 pixels. And With all the layers of them, I think we had 272 of them. So that's 27 gigapixels of just background information. So those went in the background. That left us with a little over 1 million to put in the foreground. And those are the ones that you saw in the big fly-through. These were all in the background, so they were there. You could see them, but we never actually flew through this section. So when all was done here, we put it all together, and we had to render all this out. Obviously, this is at 4K resolution. We have 5 million things moving at the same time here. And this took 7 years of render time for the 40-second shot, just for that first one. 7 total years of render time. That was split up between 60 machines. A lot of those were in Steven's basement, but a lot of them are also from other volunteers. So if you're one of the render volunteers, thank you so much for helping us get this done in a sane amount of time. This took, I think, a total of 6 months with all those machines running at once. So it definitely cut down the amount of time it took to render this. And as you can see, the result here is just absolutely breathtaking. Every dot, every speck of light that you see in this image is a galaxy. That's all the bright ones, all the little tiny faint gray and brown specks in the background, all the big ones are up close, everything there's a galaxy. If we, oops. 1 second. Zoom in a little bit here. You're zoomed in. This is the previous image was at 4K, so this is zoomed in, so you can kind of see all of these individually. And even getting closer, I mean, there's just so many things in this one image. I believe I did the math on this, and each one of these 5 million galaxies has its own, hundreds of millions of stars in it. So if we're looking at this initial picture here, there's something in the realm of quintillions of stars in this, and that's a number with 18 zeros. So just, it's absolutely mind-blowing to me to know how many different stars you can actually see all at once in this picture. So that was my contribution. I'll pass this off to Stephen.
Thanks, Bill. And Bill really kind of saved our lives. Those of you that were following the film and remember when it was coming out in 2014, and then it didn't come out till 2018. Well, it was because of this 5 million galaxies and the other galaxy fly-through shots. We had a previous image processing team that thought that they could do it in 3 months, which I multiplied by 4 to 12 months, and they were actually defeated. It is very hard stuff, and we are rendering the full dome version of this now, which is why the full dome is still not done, because we actually, Bill and I, have been kind of tweaking this because we now have to render it out at this. The film you watch is rendered out at 24 frames a second. We're rendering it out at 30 frames a second because that's what's required for full dome, and at 8K square. So it amounts to 220% more data than we did this last time. So it feels like the never-ending film. I am not actually Stephen right now. I'm standing in for Ian, who did the incredible processing on Titan. I do not have his presentation. And like I said, we're going to share the link. But what I thought I would do is share a little bit of how the sausage was made with the Titan section so that you can see. And I have way too many monitors here. Okay, so this probably looks very bizarre, but it is Adobe After Effects. And if you can see my mouse, I have this little window with these black and white blobs. They're actually images of Titan, and you see all these outlines of squares. What you're looking at is when we say multiplane, you're looking at multiple planes of photographs. So Ian and I with the great help of Mike Malaska and his guidance and a couple of interns on his teams, had all this photographic data of Titan that Ian and his image processors had to spend a couple of years processing and cleaning up. And then we arranged it in this jigsaw puzzle so that we could do a fly through that you saw in the film that felt like it was a fly through. And as you can see, it does not look like a fly through right now. If I zoom in a little bit here, you can see I've just got photographs that don't make any sense. And that's because of the whole multiplane. And this is the Walt Disney. So what much of the work of the film was taking photographs and kind of angling and arranging and lining them all up so that when they were viewed from a single viewpoint. So if I go down here, so After Effects, all After Effects was it was our animation stand camera. So all the work in the image processing had happened, and once it's arranged, and I turn this camera on, and now you recognize the shot from the film. So you can see all these planes. I don't know if these lines make sense up here, but those we're looking at a very low angle down at that image that we were doing it to create the image. And what you're seeing here is, and I'm going to solo a couple of these so you can see. So this is a long strip of Titan imagery that was done by the Cassini spacecraft that Ian spent and a volunteer, Jacek, spent a bunch of time cleaning up. If I open that and we look at that, you can see that that's just this kind of slice of Titan data that someone much more scientific could explain. And if we go in, you can see it's very high resolution. These are dunes, looks like the dunes on Namibia. So that's what that layer is. But here we're looking at it at an angle. And then underneath, we have this data that, and of course my computer is having to think about it. Maybe I can bypass it. So this data behind it, that was the imaging data from the infrared Cassini camera that was more processed over the whole thing. And if I double click on it, you can see it here. So we were just seeing a portion where we lined up that strip with that data to create that flying over Titan section. And Titan was so important to have in this film. And yes, we did have that 4-year delay, but we took advantage of it. Titan was originally not going to be in the film because of the tremendous amount of work, and the data didn't exist. But when we had that delay, I talked to Mike and Ian and said, can we do this? And they were super cooperative and very much into it. And I'm very glad we were able to get Titan in the film. So again, we'll post the link so you can get Ian's much more coherent and better explanation of how he did the processing on Titan. And we're going to move on to asking questions. I see that there are a lot of questions in here. Bill, you might want to scroll in the feed. People have some questions about your processing. As I will answer Gordon's questions about projections of images on a plane. And the answer to that, Gordon, is no. We didn't do any camera projection. We did no texture projection. All of those are the original Photoshop layers or TIFF images, just arranged in After Effects. I wanted to have, there's several different reasons. One is we didn't want to use anything that smacked of CGI in After Effects. That's why the section in the Big Bang is just a black screen with sound. I experimented with some ideas. And then the second thing is when you start projecting images onto planes and shapes in After Effects, you start to introduce resolution and texture problems, especially that are noticeable when you project at 8 stories high in IMAX. So we kept everything as the original images. So we never, we didn't do any of those little tricks that would have made our lives much, much easier. Bill, did you see those questions for you? If not, I can.
Just getting in there right now. Could you just, if you want to?
Okay, so someone had a question for you about what software and tools you used.
So most of the software was custom written in Java. We also used is a image manipulation program called ImageJ, which is where we actually did the image detection. So the custom Java code we wrote would spawn off all of these ImageJ threads that would process all of these images simultaneously and spit out the cutouts that we used. And then the actual work of building out those background tiles was done in Java and a little bit of Python. And then actually putting everything all into After Effects was all done just with After Effects scripting.
Okay, great. We've got a question here about how it's still possible to hear the Big Bang after all this time. It was pretty loud. So that is, if you Google sounds of the Big Bang, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the scientist. It may have been Mike Malaska that first turned me on to this, as he turned me on to so many different things in the film. But there was a scientist who converted the image, the data from the sound, from the Big Bang, the energy levels, he converted that into sound so that you could hear the relative energy change over time for the Big Bang. So we used his data set as is for that sound effect. It sounded cool, and it just sounded better than a traditional explosion that you hear. And again, it was data. It was an image data because that image data didn't exist. And the first image that you see in the film, that very orange image, is the aftermath radiation, which is the oldest / farthest astronomical image that we have, that the Planck Observatory did of the aftermath of the energy from the Big Bang. So, but if you Google the sound of the Big Bang, you should find his research and the explanation of his data process. There's another question for Bill about if any AI was used in the processing.
I was actually just about to respond to that into the chat. So we didn't use any real AI here. It was all the stuff we did in ImageJ was just doing, turning the image grayscale, doing blurs and edge detection sort of stuff. That was the part I kind of stayed away from. So I'm not super familiar with how that worked. No AI or anything like that. The one part where I wish we could have done some AI, I'm sure Stephen wishes we could have done some AI, was after we generated all these galaxies, we had, what was it, Stephen? Probably about 5% of them were actually stars, 5 or 10%, you'd say?
So yeah, there's a TEDx talk that I did about my experience of spending 18 months of that 4 years cleaning up the galaxies. We've actually had about 5.5 million galaxy images, and a little over 400,000 or so of those ended up being stars or jet trails or some kind of satellite or artifact that we had to manually clean out. And we've looked at a lot of different tech, but the problem is that tech would have to be perfect because actually because we're moving through those images, just 1 or 2 bad could ruin the entire shot. And since we couldn't re-render, we didn't have multiple shots at rendering those galaxy shots, we had to make sure it was right. So even if there was AI, I'm not sure that I would have voted to use it because I would have still had to go through all the images to see if AI had made any mistakes. So it would have had to been HAL 9000 levels of perfection. And if you have seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, you know that Hal's pursuit of perfection caused problems. So I'm not even sure that AI would have helped us. I'm looking at questions here. I see two. One, there's a question about the score, and there's a question about the sequel. The sequel I can answer real quickly. No way in hell. I'm still working on the full dome, but I do kind of hope that, and in fact, Ian, on Tuesday, we were asked the same question. He mentioned he had a project idea. I'm hoping that someone who's watching this film or worked on this film might be inspired to make future work using this type of technology. But for me, one multiplane film made from space that takes decades is enough. But the score, yeah, so because we had so little narration, I love LeVar, but we always wanted to make a film that was image driven and let people have time to really look and see what they were doing. There's only about 1,000 to 1,100 words of narration, which is about a third to a quarter of what's typical in a film like this. So we knew music was important. And I actually got the idea to the film listening to Adagio for Strings by Samuel Barber. So that was always going to be an anchor piece to the film. And in finding music for the rest, fortunately, when the clip went viral, seeing the Saturn fly through to Adagio for Strings spoke to many people, and it enabled several things. One, we used that to launch a Kickstarter to record our own version of Adagio Strings with our hometown Greensboro Symphony Orchestra. And that ended up being a very special recording of that because the conductor of our local city orchestra happened to have played Adagio for Strings for Samuel Barber the year before he died. So he had a deep personal connection to the film, and we just ended up with a very beautiful version of that. And then with the viral interest, I had nearly 1,000 composers contact me offering to do music for the film. And there was a guy named Peter Schlosser who we really wanted to have on this call, but he's in California and dealing with wildfires and other stuff and couldn't be with us. But Peter did the opening 15 minutes of the film, the main music. And then there's another composer, Siddhartha Barharoon, who I'm probably massacring his name. And he did the music for the kind of from the end of the galaxies to the beginning of Saturn. And we all connected and coordinated on making it kind of all tied together. So we're very fortunate to have such great music for the film because it makes all the difference in the world. And what other questions do we have?
One of the early questions I think we didn't quite get to was that people wanted to know where we are in the 3D rendering. How long do you think that's going to, and for the dome rendering, how long do you guys anticipate with how long it took, based on how long it took you for this movie?
That's a great question. And if you go to the website, there is a render status on the 40-second shot where we are with that. And we still need volunteer renderers. There's a big catch. This render is even more complicated. In the previous one, I had 33 machines that I put together in my basement to render. But the full dome version requires a very beefy GPU card. So it's very expensive to put together a machine that can render out a frame. And the frames are averaging about 50 hours per frame. And we have 1,900 frames to render for the 40-second shot. So we were doing well because we had a computer company, Puget Systems, that came on board, and they make high-end workstations, and they threw about 20 to 30 machines at it, and we were going to be done by July. But then COVID happened, and they had to send all their people home. So There are 5 of us right now still plugging away, rendering. I have only been able to combine the best of my machines down to 4 machines that are rendering right now. And we have 4 other volunteers that have 1 to 2 machines that are rendering. So if you know anybody that happens to have an extremely high-powered machine that's doing nothing for several months, those people are great candidates. The good thing is Red Giant software is, we're going to give away $2,000 software packages to the 2 people that render the most frames. And then we're going to give away a 3rd package just to anybody who's rendered even 1 frame. And we'll draw that randomly. So we are able to throw a little bling to make it worth people's while. But it's challenging, but we've been able to tweak the shot even better in full dome. And because it's 220% more data, in full dome, if you happen to see this film in full dome in 8K, you will be able to see every individual galaxy clearly with 20/20 vision, which I think will be an amazing experience in person.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I'm looking forward to it. We have another question here, and it's actually for you again, Stephen. Could you speak to the process choices for the sound effects and the atmospheric soundscape a bit?
Yes. So there's a great quote by Stanley Kubrick, which if you've gotten emails from me, I'm sure you're sick to death of reading it, but it's kind of my mantra. And the quote by Kubrick, which is, "A film is, or should be, more like music than like fiction. It should be a progression of moods and feelings. The theme, what's behind the emotion, the meaning, all that comes later." And so I can't answer on an intellectual level why I chose the sounds and music that I did. I always, when I heard it, I just knew it was right and fit in with where I wanted the film to live. I know that sounds vague compared to all the technical stuff that we've just heard, but I think the choice of music is huge. And especially with film, there's a simplicity to great film music. We had a lot of people when we talked about music and musicians who wanted me to use Holt's The Planets as the music for this film. It just seemed to make sense. But that's a great piece of music, but it's not very, to me, cinematic music. If you want to see Holt's The Planet, you go with a live orchestra and you just listen to it because it's very complex and dense. But if you take a composer that writes, to me, fantastic film music, if anybody knows Max Richter, he's tremendous. And his music has the simplicity and elemental stuff that that's the kind of stuff that works well. So that was a big part of what was underneath this. And I want to have some of our panel answer a question, which I'm actually kind of curious about now that I think everybody's had a chance to see the film. And let's just start with Bill, and I'll actually kick it off. But what's your favorite space image of all time? We had this question last time, and my particular one, and related to the film. So what's your favorite space image that we used in the film? So mine is the jets of ice that we see from Enceladus. When that picture came down, it was unexpected. Nobody thought there would be jets of ice crystals shooting out from Enceladus. What everybody thought was a minor moon of Saturn, and now could be one of the most exciting places in the solar system. So that's mine. Let's go to Bill.
I think at least my favorite image that was in the film was, I mean, I was already so familiar with obviously the 5 million galaxies and most of the Saturn imagery. The one that, I don't know, just has stuck with me the most from the film out of all of them is actually the images of the sun, especially being able to see that on a giant screen is just, I don't know, it's, you see the sun every day, you don't really think much of it. But when you can just experience how intense and how bright that shot was, just for something that you see all the time and don't really think about, that was one that really, really stuck with me from the film.
Great. What about, I'm just going to zoom order here. Let's go to Dr. Danford.
I know this has appeared in other places, but the shots of the rings of Saturn, that incredible thinness that you see, I could watch that all day. I love those.
Okay, and let's go to Mike.
Yeah. So I think for me, it was actually seeing Saturn as a whole, and the way that the imagery kind of flies around it. I almost imagine what it would be like to basically ride along on the backside of the Cassini spacecraft and see that type of giant object floating in space and that you're orbiting it. I just find that just completely beautiful.
And Tim.
I gotta squeeze in two on this one, but partially like Stephen, when I first saw the image of Enceladus, this little moon with geysers, I was just incredibly intrigued because what we're looking at is active geology. We see all kinds of really cool things in a lot of the different places around the solar system, but to actually see some of the planetary geology in process, in action, while we flew by was just spectacular. And knowing that those geysers that are shooting up ice particles are adding to the ring, but also on one of Cassini's last fly-throughs, they were able to fly through some of those plumes and get some chemical analyses of the water coming out of the moon. The data that came from that was truly remarkable. Another image, just for sheer beauty's sake, some of the images where we see the globe of Saturn with the shadow of Saturn's rings on the planet itself, I find just spectacularly beautiful.
Cool. What about Judy?
Well, I'm really biased, so I like all the Hubble images. One of them that really comes to mind, I believe I saw, and there was M82, also known as the Cigar Galaxy. It has this like huge, I guess they could be called plumes of hydrogen alpha emission just coming out of its nucleus. And I've always thought that was a very interesting galaxy. I don't even know why does it have those huge clouds? It's just something to do with it. It's kind of a small galaxy, I guess, and it's got a lot of star formation going on. But anyway, any Hubble picture, yes, that's me. I love them all.
Cool. Jason?
Okay, actually, first I'd like to use a little bit of my time to give a shout out to our friends who gave a great interview of Stephen on their podcast. It's the Three Black Geeks, and a couple of them should be watching today. And my friend Eris, it's his birthday today, actually. So happy birthday, Eris, and thanks so much for joining. They gave a great interview for Stephen, especially going into in-depth a little bit more about the working experience he had with LeVar Burton. So if you guys are interested in checking that out, the link should be in the chat, and I encourage you guys to go look that up. As far as space images go, hands down for me, it's got to be the sun. There's the Solar Dynamics Observatory, and I'm actually just going to go and share really quickly one of the images that for me is a total standout. And we had to turn this to white. This is filtered through the hydrogen alpha filter, like Judy mentioned. And this is a specific bandwidth of hydrogen burning in the sun. and it comes in colored like this because that's how the filter captures it. But the sun, as you see it in space, actually looks white. But this, to me, is one of the all-time great space images, and there are actually thousands of these because they take these images every day. So check out the Solar Dynamics Observatory. It's really incredible. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, the sun images, we had a great volunteer, Amelia, I'm probably mangling her name, but she was a solar researcher that really helped us dig into this. And thanks for mentioning that, Bill. That was difficult to image process because back then the images were on this old server in San Francisco that kept crashing and blacklisting us for downloading the images. Again, people wanted us to apply the artificial color that you usually see on images of the sun, but because we were doing everything as you would see it, we stuck with the original. In fact, I very carefully made sure that we were the exact Kelvin color temperature that the sun is, that what ended up in the film. So it's just slightly pink to the human eye, is, believe it or not, the way the sun actually is. There's a question here that I'm going to turn over to Mike, because I think it's a science question, which is how big are the particles in the ring of Saturn? How much is gas and how much is solid? You're muted, Mike.
I'm muted. Wow, that's a really good question. And I'll be honest, I do not know the answer to that. I can tell you that the size of the ice grain particles that are ejected from Enceladus, which make up the E-ring, are about a micron, if I recall, in size-ish. I mean, there's a couple studies that are kind of varying the size. So they're little tiny droplets of ice that have been shot out, and then they eventually end up going into orbit around Saturn. With respect to the stuff that's actually in the rings, is you do have a lot of different size chunks that are in there. There's like little tiny blocks, and then there's larger chunks of things. And then there's some that are actually so big that they actually cast a shadow. And when they were taking some of the equinox pictures, you saw these beautiful, striking pictures of these large mountain-sized blocks that were just extending their shadow across the rest of the rings. So there are some big chunks that are in there, and they can sometimes actually perturb and sweep out little tiny lanes in the orbits as well. So it's a lot of different sizes. I hope that answers it.
Cool. Okay. We're going to try to wrap things up here. I know people have got other questions, but feel free to message us on social media or send us an email off the website. And we'll, we didn't get to all your questions, but Sincere's got a final question as a wrap up here for us.
So it seems like the most popular question in slightly different variations is, how did you guys all find each other, and how did you all, could you explain a little bit about how you came to the project and give a little information there?
Well, I will start, since it did start with me, and we can probably go down the chain of how everybody got involved with, except we have one time loop, which is super fun, is that Dr. Danford was my astronomy professor when I was a film student at UNCG, and he taught the most amazing astronomy and physics courses. Just to give you an idea of what a great professor he was, he explained the inverse square law, which turned out to be very useful in filmmaking for light, for setting a light stand, with a thing about a toast butter gun. And he had a fire extinguisher and a skateboard that was often a part of his lectures. I mean, they were just fantastic. But anyway, I came to the project because I'd read Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and I followed Titan. And that led me to following Cassini. And Cassini, arrived in 2004, I expected it to be a huge media covering it with us all huddled around our televisions. It received no television coverage of any kind, not even C-SPAN. And I watched it on NASA TV's website, which at that time was a 320 by 240 window, their live stream of the Cassini spacecraft arrival. And I felt, well, we're not getting those photographs. We're not getting live images. This is why people don't care. So I was like, I just got to do something with live pictures. And that led me to unmanned spaceflight. And I'm going to move it on to Mike.
Yes. So I remember when Stephen started posting some of his pictures on unmannedspaceflight.com, and I was just completely enthralled with it. And I was realizing that this is like, he has a really cool technique and a really neat way of showing a lot of these pictures. And I just became an absolute fan of his work. It turned out that Stephen was actually very close by where I was living at the time in North Carolina. So I was able to actually go out and meet him and chat with him and see some of his rig and setup and stuff. And from there, it was just a matter of like meeting other people who were passionate about this work and meeting them and connecting them up with Steve and, you know, doing anything that I could to try to support the film, because it really was truly inspiring. And from it, I can say that, you know, I've met a whole bunch of different people, and all the volunteers have been, everybody who's worked on this project has been just absolutely super awesome and brought something of their skill and, most importantly, their passion to it. This is one of the things that you see in the end result, is the amount of incredible work and passion that has been put into that. And that's a testament to all the work that everybody's done.
Okay, and Mike is just simply awesome. Let's jump over to Bill.
Sure. So I joined, I think after I saw the very first official trailer on, I think it was on IO9. And I looked at the website, and there's a request, you know, looking for programmers, and, you know, not really knowing what I was getting myself into. I imagined this is a, you know, it's a regular old movie studio making a movie. I'll go see if I can help out. I'll do something for a couple months. And kind of just got this big project thrown in my lap and ended up just kind of being in charge of it. And we got our 5 million images out of it, and I kind of thought it'd be done. And then we started kind of shopping this around to like people who knew After Effects real well to try to get all these images actually in the film. And nobody really went anywhere with it. I'm like, well, I did all this work so far. I guess I'll go learn After Effects now. And so yeah, it was kind of just by chance, and then just sticking with it. It was such an amazing project, and Stephen had such a great vision for everything. I mean, I've been here for 6 years now, and was writing code for this actively till about 6 months ago when we started rendering. So it's just been a super fun trip, and I'm glad I've been able to help.
Cool. Thanks, Bill. Jason?
Okay, yeah. Well, it's kind of a long story. I've been back in 2006 starting to process Hubble images for infographics just for fun, making kind of a passion project portfolio study of the evolution of natural history and life on Earth from the Big Bang all the way through the galaxies and the solar system and down to us. And around that time, I was also in a program at American University that's run by Chris Palmer. And he's the vice president of a wonderful IMAX production company. And so I had been looking for ways of tying this into IMAX movies. And so around that time, I saw, I think it was around 2010 or 9 or 10, I saw something about a little production called Outside In. And I kind of started looking through it, and I was like, well, this seems kind of like it's a little bit of a, you know, of an indie job, and it's not really quite, you know, got legs yet. And so we'll see where it goes. And I kind of kept an eye on it. And then there's some footage started coming out that just blew my mind. And as soon as I saw the footage of the plane of Saturn breaking the camera plane, or passing the camera plane, of the rings of Saturn coming past the camera plane. I thought, oh my gosh, like we really have something here. This is amazing. And then he posted, hey, we've got distribution. And I thought, all right, I'm throwing my hat in the ring. That's it. I've got to be part of this. It's just, there are too many things that align. And I remember I gave myself a little bit of a lecture, and I was like, okay, you know, when you commit to a project like this, that's going to be extremely technically involved, you can't just go in there and paint a few images and say, hey, all right, thanks so much, have a nice day. You have to be in there to finish. And so I had no idea it was going to be 6+ years, but I'm really glad that we stuck with it. And it's been one of the best experiences of my life. So thanks.
Thanks, Jason. And Judy, did Jason find you? Is that how you came?
I've been sitting here trying to think of it. I even looked through my email archive, and I think you just contacted me first, and then you handed me over to Jason.
Yeah,
I might have. I'm sure I was looking for people who processed Hubble images, so it may have been me that found you.
Yeah, it was you.
Your work speaks for itself.
Yes, I had been doing the Hubble processing at least a couple of years. I don't know if it was maybe a little more than that, and I guess had started making a name for myself, and somehow Stephen just found me. I don't know. I don't even know if I was on Twitter yet at that point.
No, I
don't know how you found me. Huh?
I don't think you were on Twitter.
Yeah, I think I was just on Flickr, and
yes,
that's it. Maybe I had an APOD or something. Maybe that's how you found me. I do not know.
Yeah, actually, now when you said the magic word Flickr, because that's where I found Ian Reagan, and Gordon was on Flickr.
Yeah, and like Val Clavins and people like that.
Yes, Val Clavins was there. A lot of the original professors, because Flickr used to be the thing. Yeah, that's right.
I'm still there.
I have to say, we're so lucky that you did, because we had just lost Alex. He had just bailed or finished his batch, and we had hit a wall of some images that I didn't know how to correct. And I thought, we're never going to be able to get these ones done. How can we actually progress and keep moving forward and deliver all the products that Stephen was expecting? And lo and behold, here comes Judy. And I remember sending her Ro Ofuyuki and saying, oh yeah, right, this is never going to happen. And then it comes back a pure, clean nebula with not a star behind it. I was completely blown away. Masterful.
Yeah, but you still sent it back and said, well, we got to fix this. And I definitely wanted to kill you, Jason.
I'm very picky. What can I say? But it came out exquisite. It really was.
Tim.
I had the chance to see the short clip of the fly through at a local North Carolina astronomy gathering that Stephen was invited to present at. And I was enchanted. I recall afterwards going up, introducing myself, saying, look, I'm a teacher. If there's anything, any way that I can contribute. And I do recall one time having Stephen and Mike come visit my classroom when I was teaching at a school here in Greensboro to speak with the students and, introduce the students, kind of bringing in this idea that science can have many different facets and viewpoints and perspectives. And then several other times since then, I our paths would cross, and I'd see another version. And then when it came time to start thinking about putting together the formal educator's guide to go along with it, I said, hey, that's a place that I can plug in and really lean in and contribute something. So I ended up writing several of the lessons, helped with Stephen's wife as the project coordinator for the educator's guide, but served as sort of an editor, reviewer, and consultant, as well as author for several of the projects. And so again, to any educators out there in the viewing wilderness right now, you have a huge job, especially in the environment of COVID, as we're experimenting with distance learning and things like that. Getting students engaged and inspired is always a challenge. But hopefully a film like this and some of the activities that we put together may inspire the next generation to carry this torch forward.
Thanks, Tim. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap things up. And I want to thank everybody, especially Tina and Sincere with Big and Digital for making this live stream possible during this COVID time when we have not been in theaters, and we will be back in theaters. It will happen. And I want to thank, of course, the huge debt of gratitude that I can never thank these people enough, the panelists here, and then all the other many volunteers who are not on this panel. And I want to give a shout out, if you want to dive deeper into the technical side, believe it or not, this was very high level, easy breezy stuff. But Jason and Bill and Ian have done really detailed breakdowns on how they put their shots together that are on the In Saturn's Rings website, insaturnsrings.com. And there's a ton of information there. And of course, the educational kit that my partner in crime, Marie van Vuuren, was the project manager on. She's also, those of you who are donors, she built a custom database that has managed our 1,600 donors and all of that. And so be sure to check out the website and follow us on social media. And if you get a chance to see the film in person, it is truly a different experience, again, to see it when the whole frame more than fills your field of view. And thank you again. And it's been another great screening, and we will wrap this up and hope to see everyone online.
Thank you.